Before you get started cutting out your first pattern or even making your first pattern, there is something you need to do first. And this is finding your measurements. This is really important to make sure that the size you're choosing is going to fit you properly. Some patterns have sizes on them, like small, medium, large, but just because you usually wear a size small dress doesn't mean that the size small on a pattern is going to fit you. So I'm going to share with you today the 3 main areas you will need to measure before you cut out a pattern. And I'm also going to walk you through how to properly take your measurements so that you make sure they're as accurate as possible. Before we get into it, welcome here. I'm Rachel, and on this channel I share the knowledge I've learned from the past few years of teaching myself to sew my own clothes for myself and for my kids, so that you too can build a handmade wardrobe that fits your needs and your lifestyle. I also talk about this on my blog, Self-Taught Sewist, and I'll leave the link down below in case you're interested in popping over and checking it out. So let's get into it, how to properly take your measurements. So the 3 main areas you are going to want to measure are your bust, your waist, and your hips. You will use these 3 measurements, or at least one of them, for pretty much anything. Tops, dresses, pants, skirts, jackets. You will need at least one of these, which is why they're the main ones we're going to focus on. Before I show you actually how to measure these specific areas, I'm going to go over a few helpful tips to make sure you are actually measuring properly. The first thing is you always want to make sure that your tape measure is parallel to the floor, that it is straight. If it's crooked or sagging a bit, it's going to skew the measurement a bit, and that's not what we want. We want to get an accurate measure. When you're measuring, the tape measure should be tight enough that it is not falling down. It should sit and not move, but you also don't want it so tight that you can't breathe properly or it's constricting. It should just sit comfortably on the area you're measuring, and it shouldn't move and it shouldn't bother you at all. It is really best if you measure in your underclothes, just because clothing adds a bit of a layer to your measurement, and so if you're just measuring in your underclothes, that's what you'll be wearing the garment you're making on top of, and so it will fit much better. Or if someone is helping you take your measurements, then wearing something really thin, not bulky, like a light cami and some thinner leggings, something like that. It is easier to have someone help you take your measurements, but it is possible to do it yourself if you don't have anyone available to help you with it. I also recommend standing in front of a mirror. If you have a full-length mirror, that is super helpful. If not, a mirror that gets as much of your body as possible so you can really see what you're doing. It makes it so much easier, especially for some of these measurements in particular are much easier with a mirror. So those are the main tips you want to keep in mind when you are taking your measurements. And now I'm going to do a quick outfit change so I can properly show you how to take each of these measurements. Right, we're going to start off by taking your bust measurement. So I have my measuring tape here. When you're measuring your bust, you want to measure around the fullest part of your bust. I'm going to take my tape measure, make sure it's flat. For the back, I'm putting it around where my bra line or my bra strap is at the back. It should sit kind of against your bra strap. I'm going to bring it around, make sure that it is at the fullest part of my bust. I also don't want to make sure I'm raising my arms or anything, because that will actually mess up the measurement as well. Because when I raise my arms, I can actually bring it in tighter, and then when I drop them, then it's a little bit too tight. So I'm just going to make sure it's not too tight, not too loose, that it's sitting comfortably. Drop my arms down as much as I can and just kind of hold it here, and that would be how you take your bust measurement. For the next one, we're going to do your waist. So this one can be a little bit confusing because you think that your waist is, where your pants sit, or around where your hip bones are. That's actually not where your natural waist is, and there's a little trick to finding it. So what you're going to do is you're going to place your hands kind of in that gap between your rib and your hip bone, and then just bend over. And your hand should kind of sink into your side. That is where your natural waist is. That's where you're going to want to measure. I'm going to place my measuring tape right around there. Make sure it's in the right spot. And this shirt is a little bit bulky for this. It would probably be best if I something thinner, but so when you're actually doing this, you make sure you're wearing something that isn't too loose. It's not going to be adding a bunch of bulk to your measures. Again, make sure it's not too tight, not too loose. It shouldn't be expanding as you breathe, and it shouldn't be falling down either. Yeah, that's the right spot. And that's how you take your waist measurement. The last one is your hips. For your hip measurement, you may think, oh, that's going to be on where your hip bones are. Actually, you are going to measure for your hips around the widest part of your bum. So you're going to place your measuring tape on the fullest part of your bum. This is where it's really helpful to have a mirror. So this part, it's a bit trickier to see if the measuring tape is straight and if it's at the right spot. I think mine needs to be slightly lower. And that is how you take your hip measurement. So those are the three main ones. Now you may come across other measurements like your bicep or your back length or your forearm. Bicep and forearm, especially if you're doing a sleeve that has elastic in it, it might get you to measure your bicep or your forearm for where the elastic will go, so you can measure the elastic to fit you properly. Or for back length, sometimes I know especially vintage patterns have the back length listed, and that's to give you an idea of how long it will be on your torso. That one especially can be really tricky to get on your own. You may also be wondering, because I've talked so much about accuracy, the importance of accuracy, we need to get it accurate. Why is it really such a big deal? Why does it have to be so accurate? That's because I want to make sure that the clothing you're making is going to fit you best it possibly can. And when you add a little bit to your measurements, you are adding a little bit to these garments, and they're not going to fit you as you would like them to fit. For your bust, you measured a bit too high and it just doesn't fit you. You can't button it up, for example, or something like that. Skewing a little bit here and then sewing a little bit off on your seam allowances and things like that, it can add up. We want to be as accurate as possible because we want our clothing to fit us as best as it can, so that we feel comfortable and confident in it, and we reach for it over and over again, and we're not making clothing that doesn't fit us that then we never wear and it just sits in our closet. I hope you found all these tips helpful and you feel a little bit more confident about getting your measurements. If you did find this video helpful, I would love it if you would give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I will see you guys in the next one, and until then, happy sewing. Bye guys.